Chapter 2963. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was panicking, the two men from the Heaven-Shaking faction showed a satisfied look. They were members of the Heaven-Shaking faction. If they couldn't even deal with two newcomers, wouldn't they lose a lot of face? At this moment, the two men didn't think that Bailey Hongzhuang might be the culprits they wanted to catch. They only thought about how to protect their face. On this Penglai Island, there were many people with strength. But when they reached this level, what they valued the most was their face. They didn't care about other things, but they had to care about their face. Bewitching's face also showed a complicated expression, mixed with hesitation and fear. Obviously, he couldn't make up his mind. You really didn't lie to us? Is it really okay to eat this pill? You didn't deliberately lie to us and then use this method to control us, right? I heard that some forces just can't recruit people, so they use this kind of despicable method to make others have no chance to refuse. You can't be such people, right? Bewitching looked at the two men from the Heaven-Shaking faction suspiciously, his eyes full of fear. As soon as these words came out, many cultivators in the surrounding tea houses frowned. They had never thought about this before. Now that they heard Bewitching's reminder, they also came back to their senses. Could this man's guess be true? The Heaven-Shaking faction wasn't that powerful before, but in the past 2 years, they have recruited more and more people, and their influence is getting bigger and bigger. The so-called brother's death couldn't be a gimmick deliberately made up by Gao Hanshan, and in fact, he wants to use this method to recruit people, right? If that's the case, then this is really a perfect plan. It's simply keeping everyone in the dark. The two men from the Heaven-Shaking faction couldn't help but be dumbfounded after hearing Bewitching's words. Even they didn't think of this possibility, okay? The most terrible thing was that after Bewitching said so, they connected all the things together and felt that it was very reasonable. Feeling the gradually changing gazes of the people around them, the two men were almost anxious to death. What the hell was this? The pill in their hands was indeed a true chi pill, and not any other pill at all. You stinking brat. Are you tired of living? What nonsense are you talking about? The lean man cursed. He noticed that some people were gradually approaching, wanting to know what was going on. Although he was very sure that this was a true chi pill, he didn't know why he was being watched by so many people. Hurry up and eat it for me. Otherwise, we'll take action. The chubby man threatened. Something was wrong with the surrounding situation. Although the Heaven-Shaking faction was powerful, their headquarters was not on the Emerald Island. If the native forces of the Emerald Island were to suspect them, then the two of them would not have a good ending. Therefore, their only way was to let Bewitching eat the Jinchi Dan. In this way, all the problems would naturally be solved. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching's faces showed a touch of helplessness and said, "Let's eat it." The two of them slowly took the true chi pill from the lean man's hand and prepared to eat it. Chapter 2964. They believed that as long as Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching took the pills, all the misunderstandings would be resolved. However, just as the two men relaxed, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching turned around and ran away. The two of them instantly increased their speed to the extreme. They had said so much just to numb the two men from the Heaven-Shaking faction and let them know that they didn't dare to resist. Therefore, they wouldn't keep an eye on them. Bewitching's words attracted the attention of everyone present, and at the same time, it also diverted the attention of the two men from the Heaven-Shaking faction. As a result, the moment they picked up the pills was the best opportunity to escape. In the blink of an eye, the two men from the Heaven-Shaking faction had just heaved a sigh of relief. Before they could react, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching running away in front of them. They ran away. The two men were stunned for a moment. Then they quickly chased after them. "You two stinking brats, don't run." However, just as the two men from the Heaven-Shaking faction were about to chase after them, some of the cultivators around them intentionally blocked their path. The Heaven-Shaking faction's recent behavior was a little too arrogant, so some people didn't mind causing some trouble for them. Although it was only a short delay, by the time the two men caught up, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching had already disappeared in some corner. Damn it, I didn't think that those two brats would dare to run away. The skinny man secretly cursed and directly punched the wall. His skinny face was full of shame and anger. He never thought that those two cowardly fellows would have the possibility of running away. Being tricked by those two brats in front of so many people, it would be a great loss of face if word got out. If I had known earlier, I would have used force to force those two guys to eat it. Deng Liang, why do I feel that today's situation is a little bad? The chubby man frowned. He already had an ominous premonition. Deng Liang's face also became very ugly. I'm afraid we're in trouble. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have let those two guys eat the truth pill. Those two fellows ran away just like that. Could they really be the murderers we're looking for? Kong Wei, the slightly plump man, couldn't help but ask. The two of them looked at each other. In fact, even until now, the two of them had no idea what was going on. They couldn't be sure whether the two newcomers were afraid of being poisoned or because they were the culprits. Bailey Hongzhuang and Deep Beichan ran to a secluded corner before entering the chaos ring. They would only come out when it was safe. Master, the heaven-shaking faction's method of capturing people is really not simple. If we encounter something like this again in the future, I'm afraid it will be very troublesome. Xiaohei jumped in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Her furry head was full of helplessness. The scene just now was really thrilling. If they didn't seize the opportunity to escape, once they were caught, it would be really troublesome. Chapter 2965. Is the effect of the true nature pill really that miraculous? Di Beichen's handsome eyes flashed with disbelief. He had never heard of the existence of the true nature pill before. Today, when he heard of it for the first time, it really surprised him. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. This true nature pill is indeed very miraculous. 1,000 years ago, it was also a method that people often use to interrogate people. I have never seen anyone use the true nature pill before. I thought it had been lost in the Shengxian continent. I didn't expect to see it again in Penglai Island. It really caught us off guard. Is this pill the same as the one you used 1,000 years ago? Di Beichun handed the true nature pill in his hand to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the true nature pill in her hand, sniffed it, and nodded. Yes, it's the same. In that case, many of the pills are not lost. They are just in the hands of Penglai Island. Di Beichun's eyes were deep. Today was only their second day in Penglai Island. The things they came in contact with made people sigh. It seems that I have to make more preparations. I'm afraid there are many methods here that can't be compared to the outside world. A sharp light flashed through Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. In terms of methods, she also had many. She would remember today's matter. The heaven-shaking faction put them in danger. When they have the chance, they will definitely let the heaven-shaking faction have a taste of their own medicine. Bailey Hongzhuang and Deep Beichen changed their appearance again. Their appearance was no longer the same as before. Presumably, it would be difficult for the other party to discover them after they go out. After what happened just now, the people of the heaven-shaking faction will probably suspect that the two of you are the murderers. Once the two of them spread the news, I'm afraid there will be many more people of the heaven-shaking faction on Emerald Island. It will be even more difficult to leave this place. Bai Shi frowned. His eyes flashed with deep worry. There's no other way now. We can only take one step at a time. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged her shoulders. The current development of the situation was beyond their expectations. They thought that it wouldn't be difficult to muddle through today, but they didn't expect that things would become so big. It was really troublesome. We have to meet up with Xiren and inform them of this news so that they can be prepared. Fortunately, only the two of us have been exposed. As long as they disguise themselves a bit more and don't get suspected by the heaven-shaking faction, everything will be fine. Di Beichan said in a deep voice. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. We've been here for a while, so I'm afraid the outside world is already in an uproar. The heaven-shaking faction's people will soon find the inn we're staying in, and Xiren's group will be caught off guard. Let's go back and take a look. After making their decision, Bailey Hongzhuang and Deep Beichun exited the Chaos Ring and reappeared on the Emerald Island. The two of them walked all the way to the inn. When they entered the inn, they found that the heaven-shaking faction didn't immediately find them. It was much better than they expected. However, when they passed by the lobby, almost everyone was talking about what happened just now. Have you heard about what happened to the heaven-shaking faction? I heard. It is said that everyone suspects that the heaven-shaking faction's truth pill is fake. Their purpose is to use this method to recruit people. Chapter 2966. Inside the room, when Xiren and Shangwan Yingying were anxiously pacing back and forth. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen went to the square in the morning, the two of them were very worried. However, because there was a certain risk, Di Beichen and Shangwan Yingying told them to stay in the restaurant at ease. After all, it was better for the two of them to be watched than to be watched by 4 people. However, after waiting for a long time, they did not see Di Beichen and Shangwan Yingying return. When they could not help but go out to inquire about the news, they heard the discussions of the people in the inn. They asked the waiter and found out what had happened. Beichen and Shangwan Yingying ran away. I wonder if they will be caught? Shangwan Yingying's face was full of worry. They did not expect the heaven-shaking faction to be so powerful. Most importantly, although the Emerald Island was not big, it was not small either. So many people in the square had seen Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Even if they had temporarily escaped the heaven-shaking faction's pursuit, where could they hide? Once they were discovered, they would be in big trouble. When Xiren's brows were also full of worry. I believe that with Beichen and Shangwan Yingying's ability, they will definitely find a way to escape. However, when he said this, Xiren did not have enough confidence. The main reason was that the people here were more powerful than the other. If someone really wanted to catch Di Beichen and Shangwan Yingying, it would not be easy to escape. If Beichen and Shangwan Yingying are really caught with Gao Hanchuan's character, I'm afraid Shangwan Yingying's brows wrinkled. She did not dare to think about the consequences. Let's pay more attention to the news. At least we haven't heard any news of Beichen and Shangwan Yingying being caught. This is the best news. Just as Xiren and Shangwan Yingying were talking, suddenly there was a knock on the door. When Xiren immediately became vigilant. At this time, someone suddenly knocked on the door. Could it be that the heaven-shaking faction had come to the inn to search? The two of them slowly opened the door, only to see 2 strangers standing outside. However, in the next second, Xiren had already reacted. It's you guys? Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. It was not easy for Xiren to recognize them. Shangwan Yingying was a little puzzled at first, but after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang smile, she understood. Fortunately, you weren't caught. We were so worried. How could the two of us be caught so easily? However, we really can't stay on Emerald Island for long. After today's incident, the Jintian faction will definitely focus their investigation on the Emerald Island. It's really troublesome, Di Beichen said in a deep voice. I've already heard some news in the inn. Xiren nodded. I'm afraid it won't be easy for us to leave now. Anyone who intends to leave today will be suspected. The docks might already be watched. The moment we show ourselves, it's very likely that we'll be caught. Then what should we do now? Shangwan Yingying was annoyed. Gao Hanxia and Shangwan Yingying really deserve to die. They caused us such a big trouble. However, we've just arrived on Emerald Island, and we're already being chased everywhere. I don't know when this situation will be resolved. Chapter 2967. Since the Emerald Island had become like this, the situation on the other islands would not be much better than the Emerald Island. Even if they wanted to pretend that they were not newcomers, they still knew too little about the Penglai Island. As long as the other party asked a few more questions, it was very likely that they would be exposed, which was undoubtedly extremely terrible. If going to any place was the same, then what was the difference between staying on the Emerald Island and going to the Emerald Island? Hearing Xiren's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangwan Yingying fell into silence. But in their minds, they could not help but think of the words that the old man had said to them before. If they wanted to hide their identity, the easiest place was the demonic abyss. Demonic abyss. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen said in unison. Seeing Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang say the same place at the same time, Xiren and Shangwan Yingying were also surprised. What do you mean? If we leave the Emerald Island, let's go to the demonic abyss first. That should be the most suitable place for us to hide our identity. And there we can improve our strength better there, and there should be a great chance to earn spirit stones. Bewitching's voice was low, and his deep black eyes were filled with wisdom and farsightedness. He had never been to the demonic abyss, but he was very familiar with the bloodland abyss. If his judgment was correct, the demonic abyss and the bloodland abyss should be the same type of existence, but the demonic abyss had a higher requirement for cultivation. The cultivators on the Penglai Island had all met the requirements to enter the demonic abyss, so the demonic abyss must be an extremely lively place. In such a place filled with slaughter and blood, no one would care about who you were. Even if the heaven-shaking faction's influence was not small, once they went to the demonic abyss, they would definitely not be able to use their power, because no one would care about them. The demonic abyss was a place that relied on strength, not numbers. There were plenty of people who took the other party's life because of a disagreement. It was impossible for the heaven-shaking faction to rely on the power of their faction to intimidate others in the demonic refining abyss. Xiron pondered for a moment before his eyes lit up. You're right. The demonic refining abyss should be the same as the bloody ground abyss. It's an unreasonable place. No force can play a relative role in that place. You two are quite smart. Why didn't I think of that? However, with our strength, we still have to be careful when we go to the demonic abyss. The average strength of the cultivators there is probably stronger than that of the Emerald Island. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was slightly heavy. She was not extremely happy because she had found a place to go, because going to the demonic abyss might be even more dangerous than the environment they were currently in. Thinking back, when we went to the bloody ground abyss, we were also inexperienced. The people there were all on their own. As long as we are careful, there won't be a problem. At least it's much better than hiding like a rat on the Emerald Island. Xiron said with a faint smile. In that case, let's go to the demonic refining abyss after leaving the Emerald Island. Right now, we have to think of a way to leave this place. Hongzhuang, Beichen's physique shouldn't be a problem, right? With our current situation, I'm afraid we won't be able to go to the auction for the time being. Chapter 2968. Hearing Shangguan Yingying's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's pretty face showed a touch of helplessness. What she was most worried about was the change in Beichen's physique. If they could find those two herbs, Beichen's cursed physique would turn into a physique of heaven's will. Then his cultivation speed would greatly increase. On the contrary, as long as his physique didn't change, Beichen's cultivation speed would definitely be much slower than ordinary people. Unfortunately, a big problem like Gao Hanshun had appeared, so their original plan could only be ruined. Don't worry, my body won't have any problems for the time being. The most important thing now is to solve this big problem in front of us. Although Gao Hanshun won't give up until he finds us, if he can't find us, I believe he won't be able to hold on for too long. After all, even if he's the faction master of the heaven-shaking faction, he can't make everyone give up their own interest to help him find people. In the long run, complaints will be inevitable. Beichen's face was filled with a comforting smile, and his heart was filled with warmth. He knew very well how much Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two cared about him. Beichen's body won't have any problems in the next 1 or 2 years, but to be on the safe side, we can't delay for too long. We don't know if the Golden Flame Auction House still has those two herbs, and if they do, we need to consider what we need to pay them. All these preparations will take time. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear voice was somewhat heavy. To her, nothing was more important than Beichen's safety. If something happened to Beichen because of Gao Hanshun, she would definitely bury the entire heaven-shaking faction. Xiron nodded. No matter what, finding the herbs is the most important thing. Once we get to the demonic refining island and get rid of the heaven-shaking faction's pursuit, we'll have to think of a way. That damn Gao Hanshun. Those 3 brothers are really annoying. Shangguan Yingying cursed. After confirming their next plan, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 stayed in the house and were not in a hurry to leave. If they did not find out everything, it would be too risky for them to leave rashly. Not long after, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 received the news that the pier was under the control of the heaven-shaking faction. Anyone who wanted to leave would be investigated by Heaven-Shaking Faction. Heaven-Shaking Faction's people were almost certain that Bailey Hongzhuang duo who escaped today were the culprits. "I'll go downstairs to order some food and wine and get some information," when Xiren said. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two nodded. Right now, the news was very important to them. Being trapped on Emerald Island was always very dangerous. Compared to the depressed mood of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Kong Wei and the other Heaven-Shaking Faction members were not in a good mood either. It's really strange. The entire Emerald Island is only so big. We've been looking for them for so long, but we still haven't found them. Where do they hide? I've already asked the people around. It seems that after they escaped this morning, no one has seen them again. This is really strange. Could it be that someone deliberately helped them hide? Deng Liang frowned. They had caused such a big commotion today. If they could not hand the two over, they would be the unlucky ones. Chapter 2969. Kong Wei sighed, as if he wanted to accept the consequences of his crime. He couldn't help but shiver. He really didn't want to experience that kind of consequence. When Xiren returned to the room, a smile actually appeared on his face. "Beichen, the two of you are really amazing today." Xiren gave Di Beichen a thumbs up with a hint of schadenfreude. Looking at Xiren's expression, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. The two of them were somewhat puzzled, not understanding what Xiren meant. "What news did you hear? It doesn't seem to be bad news." Di Beichen asked. Xiren smiled faintly. "Actually, this is not good news for us, because our situation is still as dangerous. However, this is bad news for the Heaven-Shaking Faction, so I think it is good news." "What do you mean after talking for so long? Don't keep us in suspense. Quickly tell us." Shangguan Yingying couldn't hold back her impatience and quickly said, "Didn't you refuse to take the true nature pill today?" Di Beichen nodded. "That's right. What's the problem with that?" "That a big problem. Not only did you not take the true nature pill, but you also took it and ran away. Now, many people suspect that the reason why the Heaven-Shaking Faction was able to grow so strong in such a short period of time is because they use control methods on many people, forcing them to take the pill to recruit more people. Many people have already believed that the news of Gao Hanchuan's two younger brothers being killed was just a rumor he deliberately spread, and it was not the truth at all. It was just a pretense to deceive everyone. If the pill is still in the hands of the Heaven-Shaking Faction, they can still prove it, but the two of you took the pill and ran away, which means that the dead cannot testify. No matter how the Heaven-Shaking Faction tries to explain, everyone will still be suspicious. It is said that the local forces of the Emerald Island are very dissatisfied with the Heaven-Shaking Association because of this matter. The Heaven-Shaking Association is determined to find the two of you and prove their innocence." Listening to Xiren's words, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but be surprised. She also felt that Di Beichen's previous statement to arouse everyone's suspicion was extremely wise, but she didn't expect the matter to ferment so quickly, and the impact was also beyond her expectations. In that case, if the Heaven-Shaking Faction doesn't find you, wouldn't it be very difficult for them? Shangguan Yingying's lips curled into a smile. The Heaven-Shaking Faction had caused them so much trouble, and now she had also gotten into trouble. She was really happy to see this. When Xiren nodded, all the Heaven-Shaking Faction members from the nearby islands have rushed to the Emerald Island, saying that they must find the two of you. Moreover, I heard that Gao Hanchun will be coming to Emerald Island personally tomorrow. In short, there will be a good show to watch. In that case, we can't let them find us. It's best to turn this suspicion into irrefutable evidence. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes narrowed. Gao Hanchun had forced them into such a situation. Although she didn't have the strength to fight against the Heaven-Shaking Association, it was still very good to use some small tricks to create some trouble. It seems Hongzhuang seems to have an idea. Shangguan Yingying laughed. Chapter 2970. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance, Shangguan Yingying and the other two smiled. In terms of means, they couldn't compare with Bailey Hongzhuang. Although in terms of cultivation and number of people, they were no match for the Heaven-Shaking Faction. But in terms of means, this was not necessarily the case. Anyway, we can't leave even if we want to now. The dock has been closely guarded. Now, anyone who wants to leave will be targeted. We might as well just stay here. Xiron shrugged his shoulders. The heaven-shaking faction's people obviously wouldn't give up until they caught Bewitching and Shang Wanningying. At this moment, the people who wanted to leave were the first to bear the brunt. Since they couldn't leave, they might as well not leave in a hurry. The heaven-shaking faction's movement is so big, and it's such a forceful action, it will inevitably cause a lot of dissatisfaction. This is not a good thing for them. Bewitching slowly sipped his tea, a faint smile on his picturesque face. In order to find the four of them, Gao Hanshun would have to pay a great price in the future. Now it seemed that the heaven-shaking faction was very awe-inspiring, but once the other forces showed their dissatisfaction, the other forces would certainly take this opportunity to show their dissatisfaction. In this regard, Gao Hanshun had made the wrong decision from the beginning. Unless their strength had reached the level of the four major forces, their actions were not far from causing public anger. Naturally, Bewitching had added fuel to the fire. Of course, this was also related to Gao Hanshun underestimating the four of them. If ordinary cultivators didn't have the ability to disguise themselves, it would be very easy for them to be caught by the heaven-shaking faction. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's disguise technique was not comparable to ordinary people. Even if their cultivation had reached the Purple Realm, it would still be difficult for them to judge their disguise unless the opponent's cultivation was much higher than theirs. For example, the old man they saw today. Although they didn't know what kind of cultivation the old man had reached, Bewitching was sure that the old man was very strong. He had seen through their disguise almost at a glance. In front of such an expert, all disguises were useless. Fortunately, the old man did not have any ill intentions towards them. Otherwise, they would have really gotten into big trouble. Bailey Hongzhuang took out the alchemy furnace and began to refine the Dan. The level of the true spirit Dan was not high, but it had a wide range of uses. In his previous life, Bailey Hongzhuang would often keep a few true chi pills on her body so that she could use them when necessary. Back then, she thought that this true nature pill was a great way to obtain true information. However, if this pill backfired on them, it wouldn't be a good thing. Therefore, at that time, she specially researched how to crack the effects of this true nature pill. In the end, she managed to figure it out. However, only the members of the Bailey family knew about this. The others probably couldn't do anything about the Jinqi pill. What she needed to make now was the pill to break the true heart pill. This was not a real pill, but a fusion of some special materials to produce the effect of resisting the true heart pill. With this pill, he would be able to save a lot of trouble when traveling around Penglai Island. Chapter 2971. While Bailey Hongzhuang was fully focused on her preparations, Bewitching and the other two were very quiet. They didn't want to disturb Bailey Hongzhuang because of their actions. They would occasionally look downstairs and pay attention to the movements of the Jintian faction. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching were discovered in the morning, the people of the Jintian faction had already found this inn. They searched the room that Bailey Hongzhuang and Kong Wei had stayed in and asked a lot of information about them. The innkeeper and the waiter answered truthfully, especially the waiter who was completely dumbfounded when he found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and Kong Wei were the murderers of Gao Hanshun and Kong Wei. Yesterday, he was still vividly telling Bailey Hongzhuang and Kong Wei about this gossip. He didn't expect that the real murderers would appear in front of him. Now, he was really panicking. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Kong Wei didn't leave any useful information, so the people of the Jintian faction couldn't find anything. Bewitching and the others were very clear about this. In fact, the people of the Jintian faction couldn't confirm whether the two of them were the real murderers or not. They just wanted to calm the public opinion and eliminate everyone's suspicions. Therefore, they forcefully put the blame on Bailey Hongzhuang and Kong Wei. Of course, there were many discerning people on the Emerald Island who were very clear about this. Night slowly fell, but the Emerald Island was getting more and more lively. Everyone's discussion about the Jintian faction was getting louder and louder. This was because in this short day, many people of the Jintian faction had arrived. The number of people surprised many people. Deng Liang and Kong Wei searched for an entire day, but couldn't find any trace of Bailey Hongzhuang and Kong Wei. Their faces were getting uglier and uglier. You still can't find any trace of the two of them. Lu Jiangang's face was gloomy, and his voice was filled with deep dissatisfaction. Hearing Lu Jiangang's words, Deng Liang and Kong Wei couldn't help but tremble. Cold sweat poured down their bodies, and their hearts were filled with nervousness and fear. Second Master, we've tried our best to find them, but those two fellows seem to have disappeared into thin air. No matter how hard we searched, we couldn't find any trace of them. Deng Liang's voice became softer and softer as he spoke. His narrow and bright eyes looked at Lu Jiangang from time to time, observing his reaction. Do you know how much your actions have affected our Jintian faction? Lu Jiangang's dignified face was filled with anger. His dignified face was full of anger. Deng Liang and Kong Wei quickly kneeled on the ground and said, Second Master, we didn't expect that those two fellows actually running to escape. No one was more than the two were Beichun and Kong, and something like this had happened inexplicably. They didn't understand what had happened at all, but they had already gotten themselves into so much trouble that they couldn't get rid of it. Normally, with their status, it was impossible for them to meet the Second Master. They didn't expect to meet the Second Master under such circumstances. If the Second Master got angry, they could lose their lives at any time. Chapter 2972. The teacup fell beside Deng Liang and Kong Wei. The tea splashed all over the floor, and the teacup was shattered into pieces. Lu Jiangang's eyes seemed to be able to spit fire, as if he couldn't wait to tear Deng Liang and Kong Wei into pieces. Deng Liang and Kong Wei couldn't help but tremble. The two of them were just small fries in the Jintian faction. If the Second Faction Master wanted to kill them, it would only take a blink of an eye. Second Faction Master, we really don't know how things turn out like this. Please be magnanimous and spare us this time. Kong Wei kept kowtowing. His head soon broke and blood flowed out, but he didn't seem to feel the pain. He just kept begging for mercy. Now many forces have begun to suspect that we are using such despicable means to recruit members. Such a big pot of dirty water has been poured on our Jintian faction's head, and we can't wash it clean. And all of this is because of your negligence today. Can you two afford to pay this price? Lu Jiangang's anger still hadn't subsided. Recently, it was already very troublesome to help the faction master find those four daring fellows. He never thought that such a big thing would happen today. When he heard the news, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. After 2 years of continuous efforts, the Jintian faction's strength was getting stronger and stronger, and the number of members was also increasing. In the end, there was a rumor that they were using such despicable means to recruit members. None of the members really wanted to join them, but they were controlled and had no choice but to join. This made him spit out a mouthful of old blood. The first thing he wanted to do was to draw his sword and kill the guy who spread the rumor. But in the end, the result of the investigation was that it was their faction's members who made the rumor. Moreover, after hearing the whole story, he was speechless to the extreme. And the other people's suspicions seemed to be well-founded. He knew very well that the most important thing now was to catch those two fellows. Only by catching the source could they completely explain this misunderstanding. However, they had so many members and almost surrounded the entire Emerald Island, but they still couldn't find any trace of those two fellows. This was too ironic. Although the Jintian faction looked very impressive with so many members gathered on the Emerald Island, in fact, everyone was waiting to see them make a fool of themselves. If they couldn't find those two fellows, then their Jintian faction's image and prestige would be greatly reduced. When he thought of this, he wanted to directly send those two fellows to heaven. Unfortunately, only these two fellows knew the image of those two, so he couldn't kill them for the time being. Second Faction Master, we really didn't expect that kid to say such words. Deng Liang was about to cry. What was going on? He couldn't say that he couldn't explain himself. If he didn't take it out, then there's wouldn't it? If he didn't take it, if to the two. Lu Jiangong's face was cold. I just received news that the sect leader will be coming to Emerald Island tomorrow. You should know how clear this matter is in your hearts. Chapter 2973. With a wave of Lu Jiangong's hand, Deng Liang and Kong Wei scrambled out of the inn. When they heard that the sect master had come in person, their faces were already ashen. Even the sect master had to come in person for this matter. It could be seen that the influence had completely exceeded their imagination. The two immediately rushed out as if they had gone mad. Whether they could save their lives depended on whether they could catch those two guys before the sect master arrived. Otherwise, only death would await them. Compared to Deng Liang and Kong Wei's gloominess, the situation of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others was much calmer. As the saying goes, the most dangerous place is the safest place. This inn was the first inn that the Jintian faction searched. Instead of going to other inns, it was better to continue staying here. The other inns were also facing the same situation, but the biggest problem was the residence of Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching. Naturally, the two of them couldn't go back to their rooms. If they went to other inns at this time, it would be easy to be suspected by others. Now, they could only stay in Xiren's room for the time being. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching weren't worried about this. When the Jintian faction came to search again tomorrow, the two of them would leave directly. Once they escaped into the Chaos Ring, no one would be able to find them. For the whole night, the Jintian faction didn't stop moving. Almost all the cultivators stayed in the inn, and the figures that appeared outside the inn all belonged to the Jintian faction. However, for the whole night, the Jintian faction didn't find Bailey Hongzhuang and Kong Wei's figures. The next morning, when Xiren went downstairs to inquire about the news, he found that he didn't see any figures of the Jintian faction. Even the figures outside the inn had disappeared. This unexpected calm made Xiren frown. This situation seemed a little strange. The movement of the heaven-shaking faction this time is really not small. It is said that the leader of the heaven-shaking faction, Gao Hanshun, personally came today. They will not give up until they catch those two. This matter has a great impact on the heaven-shaking faction. If the heaven-shaking faction wants to eliminate the impact, they can only do this. However, no one knows if it's true or not. In any case, I don't believe that those two guys are really murderers. The heaven-shaking faction only wants to use this name to hide from the eyes and ears of others. As for whether that pill is a true chi pill or not, I'm also very doubtful. In the hall, everyone had their own opinions. Although the heaven-shaking faction was very impressive recently, but now that the members of the heaven-shaking faction were not here, everyone was naturally discussing happily. Xiren's expression changed slightly when he heard the news. He then returned to his room. Even Gao Hanshun can't sit still. It seems like the impact of this matter is not small. Shangguan Yingying's beautiful face was filled with a hint of surprise. I originally thought that it would take a long time for me to meet Gao Hanshun, but I didn't expect to meet him so soon. With Gao Hanshun's arrival, I'm afraid the situation will become a lot more complicated. Xiren's brows revealed a bit of worry. The original situation didn't make him too worried, but now that Gao Hanshun had come in person, it proved that the Emerald Island had become the focus of the heaven-shaking faction. Most importantly, Gao Hanshun was able to establish such a large force on Penglai Island. It was enough to see Gao Hanshun's ability and means. Chapter 2974. Bewitching's pitch-black eyes flashed with a complicated light. It seems that we have to meet Gao Hanshun in advance. After all, he has seen the four of us with his own eyes. When the time comes, we must be more careful. He is not as easy to fool as the heaven-shaking faction's members. Xiren nodded slightly. When the heaven-shaking faction's members came to ask about it yesterday, they just fooled them with a few words. The other party mainly wanted to find Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching, so they had been comparing the two portraits and didn't ask much other questions. However, these people didn't expect that Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching could disguise themselves, so they were completely looking in the wrong direction. We must learn more about Penglai Island. Otherwise, once they ask, we will be exposed before we can answer a few words. Shangwan Yingying frowned. Their biggest problem was that they didn't know how to disguise themselves as cultivators who had stayed in Penglai Island for a long time. If they could solve this problem, then many problems could be solved. Hearing Shangwan Yingying's words, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but think of the manual she received when she received the spirit stones yesterday. She immediately took out the manual. Looking at it, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes couldn't help but light up because this manual actually had a map of the entire Penglai Island, and there was a certain introduction of each island. Although it was only a brief introduction, at least it was much better than them being confused before. We were so busy yesterday that we didn't read the contents of this manual, Bailey Hongzhuang said in surprise. The four of them immediately read the contents of the manual together. After reading it, everyone's face was filled with smiles. Even if it was just an extra map, it was a great help to them. From the looks of it, the distance between Emerald Island and Demon Refining Island isn't too far. As long as we can successfully leave Emerald Island and head towards the direction on this map, it won't take long for us to reach Demon Refining Island, when Xiren said. Di Beichun nodded slightly. The distance between the islands here isn't too far. Demonic Refining Island itself is a bit further away from the other islands. The island in the center is Penglai Island, so it seems that both Emerald Island and Demonic Refining Island are at the periphery of Penglai Island. A place like Demonic Refining Abyss isn't suitable to be at the center. If you really want to go there, it's still a place that is further away. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but think of the bloody ground abyss that was covered by blood qi. If such a place was at the center, it would be really strange. She just didn't know if this demonic refining abyss was the same as the bloody ground abyss. When we came in from the outside world, the first place we encountered was Emerald Island. Gao Hanshun knew that we were new cultivators, so he was sure that we would come ashore on the first few islands. I'm afraid that the heaven-shaking faction's members are mainly concentrated on these few islands, which is why they were able to arrive at Emerald Island so quickly after the incident. Di Beichun said in a deep voice, "There's nothing we can do about it. Who asked us to know too little, so we can only fall into his trap?" Xiren shook his head with a helpless expression. Chapter 2975. Following Xiao Hei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Xiren. She also felt that this was a bit strange. It was fine if she and Di Beichun didn't know enough about Penglai Island. After all, the information they had was obtained from Lan Yunxiao and the others. From a secretive attitude of the demon sect's sect master, it could be seen that they were very secretive about this information, so the information they obtained was very limited. When Xiren was different from them, Sect Master 1 was his father. He should tell them everything he knew. How come when Xiren didn't know enough about Penglai Island, except that he knew a little more about the route and method of coming here than them? My old man's personality is very strange. He said that when he first came here, he relied on himself to wander the world. I'm already a group of 4 with you. If I still need him to tell me all kinds of things, then I'll lack the taste of exploring by myself. He always felt that a young person like me should wander the world by myself, so he didn't tell me anything if he could. I'm also very helpless about this. A smile appeared on Di Beichun and Shangwan Yingying's faces as they looked at Xiren. It was obvious that they already knew. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Xiren, then at Di Beichun and Shangwan Yingying, who couldn't help but snicker. It seemed like she still underestimated Sect Master Wen's strange personality. Compared to Lan Yunxiao and the others who were worried and anxious, Sect Master Wen completely let Xiren grow up. It's been so many years. It's really been hard on you. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head and sighed. At noon, when Xiren and Shangwan Yingying went to the restaurant's main hall to eat, this was now the most convenient source of information for them. In addition, almost everyone was paying attention to the heaven-shaking faction, so they could easily find out all of their movements here. However, when the two were halfway through their meal, a group of people suddenly walked into the inn. At the sight of this group of people, the hall suddenly quieted down, and the atmosphere froze a little. Everyone's gaze fell on the newcomers, and their eyes were filled with fear. Innkeeper, bring out some of your signature dishes. A middle-aged man walked to an empty table and sat down, while the people behind him also sat down. When Xiren and Shangwan Yingying couldn't help but look at the middle-aged man. They weren't unfamiliar with this man's appearance at all, because this was the Gao Han they had seen in the video before. The heaven-shaking faction's sect master really came. I didn't expect them to directly come to this inn as soon as they arrived. With such a big thing happening, Gao Han naturally can't sit still. However, you have to speak softly. If you cause them to be unhappy, then things will be troublesome. Yesterday, didn't the heaven-shaking factions, didn't find them? Now that they've come here, could it be that they think those two will return to this inn? Everyone was discussing spiritedly and almost lost interest in eating. Their eyes were constantly sneaking glances at the heaven-shaking factions members. Chapter 2976. Hearing this, the shopkeeper didn't dare to neglect and hurriedly walked in front of Gao Han and the others. Faction Leader Gao, second Faction Leader Liu, I really don't know anything. I only know that it's their first time on Penglai Island, and they don't know what spirit stones are. I told them that they can temporarily buy on credit and go to the square to get the spirit stones the next day. Other than that, there's nothing else. The shopkeeper directly said everything. In fact, the people of Jintian faction had asked him about this several times. However, other than the most basic information, he didn't know anything else. As the closest island to the outside world, newcomers often came here. He had long been accustomed to it, so why would he ask too much? Don't you know that our Jintian faction is looking for a few newcomers recently? Didn't you suspect them when you saw them? Liu Jiangang narrowed his eyes, his gaze sharp and piercing. The shopkeeper shook his head repeatedly. He only wanted to prove his innocence. I heard the news before, but I heard that your gang is looking for 4 people, and they only have 2 people. Moreover, they don't look like daring people, so I didn't think about it that way. As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes flashed with a touch of understanding. The other party didn't look like daring people, which meant that the shopkeeper didn't think the 2 people were the murderers. As a result, everyone was even more suspicious that the Jintian faction was trying to cover it up. Can you tell that a bad person is a bad person at a glance? After being a shopkeeper for so many years, you don't have any eyesight at all. Liu Jiangang slammed the table with one hand, his face full of anger. Do you want to go against our Jintian faction? At this time, Gao Han, who had been silent, suddenly raised his hand and interrupted Liu Jiangang's words. Since the shopkeeper has already said that he doesn't know, then don't make things difficult for him. Seeing Gao Han speak, Liu Jiangang stopped talking, but the unhappy look on his face was still very obvious. We want to catch the murderers. This matter has caused a lot of inconvenience to many people. What's more, the shopkeeper just didn't think of it for a while. If it were you, you might not be able to recognize it immediately. After hearing Liu Jiangang's unreasonable words and hearing Gao Hanchuan's reasonable words, everyone felt that Gao Hanchun was a reasonable person. No wonder the heaven-shaking faction was able to develop to such an extent in such a short period of time. A large part of the reason was because of Gao Hanchun. Xiren and Shangwan Yingying looked at each other. Gao Hanchuan's method of buying people's hearts was really good. The 2 of them echoed each other and eliminated a lot of negative influence. It was really not simple. Thinking back to how Gao Hanxia and Gao Hanxiu had pretended to be harmless in front of them, the 3 brothers were indeed the best at pretending. Thank you, gang leader Gao. The shopkeeper hurriedly expressed his gratitude. Yingying, let's go. When Xiren put down his chopsticks. Now that Gao Han and the others had arrived, they wouldn't be able to get any more information if they continued to stay here. The most important thing was that they had to quickly inform Di Beichen and Wang Zhong of this news. Since Gao Han and the others had come here, it was highly likely that they wanted to search this restaurant. Once the 4 of them were found in the same room, it would be very suspicious. Chapter 2977. Xiren took the lead and walked towards the 2nd floor of the inn. Shangguan Yingying was about to get up when she found that the hair clip on her head had fallen to the ground. When she picked it up, Wen Xiren had already walked some distance away. Just as she passed by Gao Hanchuan's table, a voice suddenly rang out behind her. Wait! Shangguan Yingying's footsteps paused, and her expression changed. Gao Hanchuan's men suddenly called out to her. Could it be that they found something wrong? She couldn't help but feel nervous. Gao Hanchun wasn't an ordinary person who was easy to fool. If they were discovered here, it wouldn't be easy for them to escape with their strength. Even though she was nervous to the extreme, Shangguan Yingying's face still didn't show the slightest bit of panic. She turned around and looked at the man who spoke to her, and a trace of doubt appeared in her eyes. Miss, you look very unfamiliar. As soon as these words came out, Shangguan Yingying's heart thumped, but she forced a smile on her face. What's the matter? The man chuckled. Nothing, I just saw that you were beautiful, so I hope you can sit down and accompany me for a drink or two. Shangguan Yingying, who was ready to fight at any time, relaxed a bit after hearing these words. It seemed that the other party was just lustful and didn't recognize her. This result was much better than the former. When Xiren saw that Shangguan Yingying was stopped by the people of the heaven-shaking faction, his expression became very ugly. He couldn't help but say, Wife, we should go back quickly. While speaking, Xiren's eyes couldn't help but fall on the man who stopped Shangguan Yingying. There was a bit of dissatisfaction and fear in his eyes, but his attitude was very tough. Just the way he called her wife was enough to explain everything. Third brother, we are busy looking for the murderer. Don't cause trouble. Lu Jiangang couldn't help but frown. Gue Jun was good at everything, and he was also strong. The only bad thing about him was that he was too lecherous. If it was a normal day in the gang, it wouldn't matter. But now that their heaven-shaking faction was busy dispelling the negative rumors, Gue Jun couldn't help but tease the girl. This really made him feel helpless. Hearing Lu Jiangang's warning, Gue Jun looked at Gao Hanchuan's expression again and smiled brightly. I just want to have some fun. If you don't let me, I won't do it. Shangguan Yingying immediately let out a sigh of relief. She quickened her pace and walked to Xiren's side. The two of them returned to the room together. After closing the door, Shangguan Yingying loosened her clenched fists. Her palms were covered with a thin layer of sweat. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun saw that Xiren and Wen Xinya's expressions were very strange. They couldn't help but walk up to them and ask, What's wrong with you two? What happened? Xiren took a deep breath and said, We met Gao Hanchun and the others downstairs. Yingying was stopped by them. We thought we were discovered and were shocked. In the end, that guy was just lecherous. Nothing happened. Don't worry. Shangguan Yingying immediately said. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun couldn't help but frown. Although Shangguan Yingying and Wen Xinya said it simply, they also understood that the situation just now could be said to be very dangerous. If the other party had bad intentions towards Shangguan Yingying, it would be a direct confrontation. Chapter 2978. Beichun, Gao Hanchun, and the others came to this in first. I think the situation isn't good. Maybe Gao Hanchun wants to search the inn again. What should you do? When Xiren's face revealed a look of worry. With Gao Hanchuan's strength and eyesight, it would be very difficult for them to hide in this house without being discovered. Although I don't know Gao Hanchuan's true strength, I can vaguely judge that Gao Hanchuan's strength has reached the 8th level of the Purple Realm when we were in the lobby. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun looked at each other and said, Before they search, we'll leave first. After what happened just now, they shouldn't be too suspicious of you. We'll come back to meet you when we're safe. Leave? Shangguan Yingying was startled. Where can you go if you leave now? The entire Emerald Island is now filled with people from the heaven-shaking faction. As long as they find out where you two stayed before, I'm afraid trouble will be inevitable. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand and said with a smile, You don't have to worry. We have our ways. Xiren couldn't help but look at Di Beichun, only to see Di Beichun nodding confidently. Only then did he feel relieved. Everyone had their own methods. Since Di Beichun and Bailey Hongzhuang were so confident, they must have thought of a foolproof plan. Naturally, he didn't have to worry. Faction Master, in my opinion, This innkeeper really doesn't know any useful information. It's more reliable for us to search one by one. I don't believe those two guys have the ability to burrow through the ground. We can definitely find them, Lu Jiangang said. Gao Hanshun nodded. Although this method is stupid and cumbersome, it's the only thing we can do in this situation. Then we'll start searching from the inn behind. Yesterday, those guys probably didn't search carefully, so those two guys took advantage of the loophole. Today, I'll search it myself. Lu Jiangang's eyes flashed with a ferocious light. Those two damn bastards actually dared to slander his heaven-shaking faction. He would definitely make those two bastards beg for death and have no way to get out. That's right. There's no need to search this inn. Those two guys can't have come back here. Gui Ju nodded. That's not necessarily true. Gao Hanshun narrowed his eyes, and a wisp of a complicated expression appeared on his face that couldn't be considered handsome. He was like an old fox that caused others to feel intimidated. The most dangerous place is the safest place. Perhaps he's really audacious and dares to continue staying in this inn. Hearing this, Lu Jiangang and Gui Jun looked at each other. Although they both believed that the possibility of the other party still staying in this inn was extremely small, the sect leader had always been smarter than them. Since the sect leader had said so, they didn't mind searching this place thoroughly. After finishing their lunch, the members of the heaven-shaking faction immediately began to move. Compared to yesterday, they were even more imposing today, because their leader had personally come. With their faction master here, what were they afraid of? Master, they really want to search this inn. I'm afraid we have to leave quickly. Xiao He quickly returned to the room and reported the news she had just heard to Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 2979. Hearing Xiao He's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not surprised. They never looked down on Gao Hanshun. If they were in Gao Hanshun's shoes, they would have made the same choice as Gao Hanshun in such a situation. The most dangerous place is the safest place. This rule is often ignored by many people, but it is indeed the best way. Ziren, Hongzhuang, and I must leave before they search. You two be careful. We will come to you when the time comes. Bewitching said. Ziren nodded slightly. You two be careful. Okay. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching walked out of the house together and went downstairs directly. They also thought of jumping out of the window directly, but the people outside were all from the heaven-shaking faction. This way, they would feel like they were exposing themselves. It would be better to walk out from the front door, which would make them look more confident. However, the two of them were also very clear about the risks of walking out from the front door. Once they were stopped by Gao Hanshun and the others, it would be very troublesome to deal with. But they had no other way now. The two of them walked down the stairs together and saw that many of the cultivators who were eating in the lobby were also going out. Although the heaven-shaking faction's power was not small, it could not stop everyone. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching were slightly relieved. It seemed that the situation was better than they thought. Following the crowd, the two of them walked out of the inn together. However, just as the two of them walked to the entrance of the inn, a voice sounded behind them. Wait. Lu Jiangang slowly walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang. His sharp hawk-like eyes swept over Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching and said, Which island did you two come from? He vaguely felt that there was something wrong with these two people. They didn't even have the slightest intention of watching the show and directly walked out. They were only one step away from success, but they were suddenly stopped. It didn't feel good, especially after hearing Lu Jiangang's question. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching felt even worse. No matter which island they said they were from, as long as the other party asked a few more questions, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be exposed. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly thought of an idea. A touch of arrogance and dissatisfaction appeared on her delicate face as she said coldly, Do we need to tell you where we are from? As soon as she said this, the person who was slightly stunned was Lu Jiangang. He did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to suddenly say something like this. It was really beyond his expectations. Once again, he sized up Bailey Hongzhuang and Xiao Luo, only to find that the two of them had an arrogant look between their brows. The confidence in his heart could not help but weaken a little. Could it be that the identities of these two people were not simple? Otherwise, why would they say something like this to him? Seeing that Lu Jiangang seemed to be frightened, Deep Beichun also said in a deep voice, "I didn't know that the heaven-shaking faction was so powerful. It seems that the entire Emerald Island will be under the jurisdiction of the heaven-shaking faction in the future." Chapter 2980. The two people in front of him spoke so arrogantly. It could be seen that their background was not simple. Could it be that they were from Penglai Palace? If that was the case, then once these two people sent the news back to Penglai Palace, it would not be good news for their heaven-shaking faction. Although the heaven-shaking faction's current power was not small, it was nothing in front of the Penglai Palace. As long as Penglai Palace wanted to destroy them, it would definitely not be a difficult thing. For a moment, Lu Jiangang looked at the two people in front of him and did not know what to say. Gao Hanchun also noticed the movement on Lu Jiangang's side. Suddenly, he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a look of surprise. "May I know which faction you two are from?" Gao Hanchun slowly walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. His calm face was full of politeness, but his eyes flashed with a light that only he understood. He had stayed in Penglai Island for so many years and had seen all kinds of methods. Naturally, he would not be frightened by a few simple words from the other party. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Gao Hanchun's expression and already knew that Gao Hanchun was not someone who was easy to fool. If they did not make it clear, they would not be able to leave smoothly. After thinking about it, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly thought of a faction. 100 Flowers Gate. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her chin slightly. When she talked about the 100 Flowers Gate, her face was full of pride and pride. She did not know anything about the other sections. Whether it was Penglai Palace or Crimson Moon Sect, they were all famous for their strength. With Di Beichen and her cultivation, as long as they made a move, they would be completely exposed. However, she still had some confidence in her medical skills. Although she had not seen the medical skills of 100 Flowers Gate, she believed that there would be no problem in hiding it with her medical skills. Hearing the three words 100 Flowers Gate, the faces of Gao Hanchun and others changed. However, this result was much better than hearing that the other party was from Penglai Palace. Lu Jiangang's face became very ugly. He didn't expect that he would actually provoke people from the four major forces. Although the members of the 100 Flowers Gate were not like the members of the Penglai Palace and the Crimson Moon Sect, who would attack without warning among the four major factions, the 100 Flowers Gate was the one that no one wanted to offend. That was because the doctors of the 100 Flowers Gate were truly quite capable, and their ability to recruit them was even more impressive. "So if the two of you are from the 100 Flowers Gate, my apologies," Lu Jiangang hurriedly said. Gue Jun also walked over to Bailey Hongzhuang and Li Qiye's side. He looked at the two of them in surprise and uncertainty. "Since the two of you are from the 100 Flowers Gate, may I ask if you can show your token?" As soon as he said that, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's faces turned cold. Their sharp gazes shot straight at Gue Jun. "I didn't know that the people of our 100 Flowers Gate would need to show a token to someone from the heaven-shaking sect. Aren't you overestimating you?" Deep displeasure and anger flashed across Di Beichen's face. His words became even more impolite. Since they had already pretended to this point, they could only keep up the pretense. They had no idea what the so-called token was, so the only thing they could do was keep up the pretense. Chapter 2981. Gao Hanchun's expression became more and more complicated when he saw the atmosphere between them become more and more tense. Originally, according to his judgment, the two people in front of him could not be from the 100 Flowers Gate. They were very likely tricking him. However, the two people's expressions were flawless. He could not help but wonder if he had made a mistake. Were they really from the 100 Flowers sect? From what I know, the people from the 100 Flowers sect don't go out often. Have the two of you come to Emerald Island to treat the master of the Qinghong gang? Gao Hanchun asked. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun looked at each other. They both hesitated. They had heard of the Qinghong gang before. It was said that the Qinghong Gang was a local organization on Emerald Island. They were originally on par with the Heaven Shaking Gang, but the Heaven Shaking Gang had developed too quickly in the past 2 years, so they had surpassed them. However, they had never heard of whether the master of the Qinghong Gang was sick or not. If Gao Hanshun had purposely said something that did not exist to test them, then all the lies they had said before would be exposed if they said yes. How they should answer was truly a problem. If they said no and Gao Hanshun continued to ask, they would not know how to answer either. This was truly a huge problem. When the people in the restaurant heard that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were from the 100 Flowers sect, their attitudes had changed. When they looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen again, their gazes were filled with reverence. Now that they heard Gao Hanshun's words, they all understood. I heard that the master of the Qinghong Gang, Yi Fei, had some problems with his body. It seems that he hasn't been cured yet, so Yi Fei hasn't appeared recently. In that case, it's very likely that these 2 people from the 100 Flowers sect were invited by Yi Fei to treat him. Perhaps. The disciples of the 100 Flowers sect don't usually leave 100 Flowers Island. Only someone of Yi Fei's status would be able to invite them. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen originally did not know how to answer, but after learning that Yi Fei was indeed sick, they made a decision. Since you know, then why are you still obstructing me? If there's a delay, can you bear the responsibility? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Gao Hanshun coldly. As far as I know, the Great Cyan Gang's power on the Emerald Island is much more stable than your Heaven-Shaking Gang. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the faces of Gao Hanshun and all the Heaven-Shaking faction members turned ugly. Some of them even glared at Bailey Hongzhuang. Gao Hanshun came personally this time because the Heaven-Shaking faction's movements on Emerald Island were too big recently. The Cyan Great faction could no longer stand by and watch. Using this reason, Yi Fei had already expressed his dissatisfaction. Gao Hanshun came this time to explain to Yi Fei. Given his pride, he naturally did not want to explain to Yi Fei. However, a powerful dragon could not defeat a local snake. The Green Great Gang was ultimately a local faction of Emerald Island. In this place, they were indeed inferior to the Green Great Gang. Now that he had been slapped in the face by Bailey Hongzhuang in front of everyone, one could imagine how he felt. Chapter 2982. Fuck, this Gao Hanshun is really something. He can still laugh, even after being put in such a situation. Xiao Hei could not help but be dumbfounded when she saw Gao Hanshun's reaction. Logically speaking, they should have been asked to leave right away. She did not expect Gao Hanshun to still be so insistent, as if he had not heard the words that had slapped them in the face. This is why Gao Hanshun is so scary. Xiao Bai shook her head. This guy still doesn't believe that Master and the others are really from the 100 Flowers faction. That's why he said those words to test them. He's completely forcing Master and the others into a dead end. That damn guy, I really want to bite his neck off. A fierce look flashed across Bai Shi's eyes. Unfortunately, he was no match for Gao Hanshun at his current level of strength. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen felt helpless as well. This Gao Hanshun was simply a dogskin plaster. However, his psychological endurance was indeed admirable. However, they did not even know what the leader of the Great Cyan Gang looked like. Gao Hanshun did not look like he was joking at all. If they followed him and were exposed, they would really be surrounded by 2 gangs. The situation would be even worse than it was now. Beichen, what should we do? Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but ask Di Beichen through voice transmission. This was really a difficult situation to solve. Di Beichen's mind was also spinning as he tried to think of a solution. However, it was a dead end in front of him. There's no other way. I'm afraid we can only take a gamble. Di Beichen said in a low voice. The only thing we can bet on is that the relationship between the Great Cyan Gang and the Heaven-Shaking faction is not good. I think this is very likely. One was a local force of Emerald Island, while the other was an extremely arrogant gang within their own sphere of influence. Logically speaking, the possibility of them having a good relationship was very small. Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her phoenix eyes. Her eyes that were as bright as glass flashed with determination. They could only take a gamble. Gue Jun was already very dissatisfied with Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang's arrogant attitude. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang had fallen silent, he couldn't help but ridicule. Why aren't you saying anything? Could it be that the imposter is afraid of being exposed, so he doesn't dare to agree? Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Gue Jun coldly. We just don't want to go with you. Don't try to goad me. Let's go. You'd better be mentally prepared. Bailey Hongzhuang crossed her arms in front of her chest, and her face was full of disdain. She didn't look guilty at all. Instead, she looked like she was waiting for the heaven-shaking faction to be slapped in the face. Since that's the case, it's getting late. Let's set off together. Gao Hanshun still had a faint smile on his face. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang didn't ignore the ruthlessness in the depths of his eyes. On the way to the Great Cyan Gang, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were also very tormented. They only hoped to find an opportunity to leave. However, Gao Hanshun and the others already hated them to the extreme. They surrounded the two of them tightly along the way, not giving them any chance to escape. Under such helpless circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others arrived at the Great Cyan Gang together. Chapter 2983. Boss Yi, long time no see. Gao Hanshun had a fake but warm smile on his face. He looked at Yi Li Fei as if he had seen a good friend he hadn't seen in a long time. He was in an extremely good mood. Yi Li Fei's face was also brimming with joy. Boss Gao is truly a rare guest. You actually have time to visit me today. Bailey Hongzhuang sized up Yi Li Fei. Yi Li Fei was already around 50 years old. He wasn't as strong as Gao Hanshun in his prime, but his majesty and aura weren't any weaker. It seemed that he had stayed on Penglai Island for much longer than Gao Hanshun. Boss Yi, I heard that you haven't been feeling well recently, so I invited people from the 100 Flowers Gate to treat you. As a matter of fact, I just happened to meet people from the 100 Flowers Gate on my way here, so I came with them. Gao Hanshun smiled as he introduced Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen to Yi Li Fei. However, in the eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, his smile was like a knife hidden behind smile. Hearing this, Yi Li Fei's gaze couldn't help but fall on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. At that moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen couldn't help but feel nervous. If Yi Li Fei directly exposed them, then the two of them would have to prepare to fight their way out. At the same time, Gao Hanshun was also silently sizing up Yi Li Fei, Bailey Hongzhuang, and Di Beichen's expressions. He still didn't quite believe that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were really from the 100 Flowers Gate. Now, as long as Yi Li Fei confirmed it, he would know the result. For a moment, the atmosphere was rather strange. In the next moment, a smile gradually appeared on Yi Li Fei's face. Boss Gao is truly considerate. This is an old illness of mine, and it's been acting up quite badly recently. That's why I specially invited an expert from the 100 Flowers Gate to treat me. As soon as these words came out, the originally strange atmosphere suddenly calmed down. Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun couldn't help but look at each other. Their expressions were rather ugly. They didn't think that these two people really were from the 100 Flowers Gate. In that case, didn't they offend two people they shouldn't have? This was really troublesome, because the members of the 100 Flowers Gate rarely left 100 Flowers Island. Many people subconsciously ignored their influence. However, at their level, they knew very well that if the 100 Flowers Gate really wanted to deal with someone, it was often impossible to guard against. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. It seemed that they had made the right bet. At the very least, he hadn't lost yet. Gao Hanshun was clearly surprised by this result. Even though he concealed it well, the flash of surprise in his eyes did not escape Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' eyes. Then these two experts from the 100 Flowers Gate came at just the right time to treat Sect Master Yi. Why don't we let them treat you now? Gao Hanshun probed without batting an eyelid. A smile appeared on Yi Li Fei's face. If gang leader Gao doesn't mind, I'll let them treat me first. Gao Hanshun nodded. Of course I don't mind. Right now, The most important thing is Sect Master Ye's illness. Nothing else is urgent. In that case, I won't be polite. Yi Li Fei turned to Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun and said, "Please." Chapter 2984. As soon as he entered the room, the smile on Yi Li Fei's face disappeared. His gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang and Gao Zhinshan became as sharp as a knife. "Just who are you two? Why are you pretending to be disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate?" A powerful aura surged from Yi Li Fei's body. If Bailey Hongzhuang and Gao Zhinshan dare to have any other thoughts, Yi Li Fei would definitely take their lives. "Gang leader Yi, why are you so sure that we're not disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate?" Di Beichun asked calmly. He did not panic at all because of Yi Li Fei's words. The disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate left a few days ago. I don't think the 100 Flowers Gate would send 2 groups of people for my old illness. A sharp light flashed through Yi Li Fei's eyes. "Cut the crap. Why are you pretending to be disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate and coming here?" Di Beichun raised his hands and placed them in front of his chest. "Gang leader Yi, calm down. Why don't we make a deal?" Hearing that, Yi Li Fei could not help but sneer. "Why do you think you have the right to make a deal with me? You're like turtles in a jar right now. If gang leader Yi wanted to expose us, you would have done so in front of gang leader Gao. Since you've only exposed us after coming here, I'm sure you don't have a good impression of the Heaven-Shaking Gang like us. Or perhaps you don't want to help the Heaven-Shaking Gang at all." Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes flashed with a dazzling light. Her face was brimming with confidence, and her voice was filled with certainty. If they hadn't been clear about the specific situation before coming here, they had completely understood after what had just happened. Yi Li Fei frowned slightly. Looking at the 2 familiar faces before him, he was not in a good mood either. "My relationship with the Heaven-Shaking Gang is not that good, but the 2 of you have no right to make a deal with me. Don't think you've seen through me just because you've seen through a little. Killing the 2 of you is not a problem for me at all." Yi Li Fei's voice was cold. He did not like people pretending to be smart in front of him. "I'll treat your illness, and you'll help us continue to cover it up. How about that?" Bailey Hongzhuang went straight to the point. Yi Li Fei, who originally intended to directly refuse, could not help but be stunned after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. He said, "You will treat my illness?" "That's right." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head. Her expression was calm. However, Yi Li Fei suddenly laughed out loud. "Ha! Even the people from the 100 Flowers Gate couldn't cure me. And you say you can? What a joke." Seeing Yi Li Fei like this, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't say anything. She just looked at Yi Li Fei quietly and smiled. Yi Li Fei laughed for a moment before he could no longer continue laughing. At this time, Bailey Hongzhuang spoke up. "The people of 100 Flowers Gate can't cure you, but that doesn't mean that I can't cure you. If I didn't come today, you wouldn't have lived past 3 months at most. It's up to you whether you want to believe me or not." As soon as she saw Yi Li Fei, Bailey Hongzhuang noticed his thick aura of illness. Even though he hid his aura and presence extremely well, as a doctor, Bailey Hongzhuang could still tell a glance. Chapter 2985. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Yi Li Fei's expression changed abruptly. His pupils dilated, and he no longer looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with the same contempt he had before. "I won't live for more than 3 months." That was what the disciples of the 100 Flowers sect had told him. However, the disciples of the 100 Flowers sect had made it clear that he was terminally ill. Even they had no way to treat him. Over the past few days, those words had been lingering in his mind, and his heart was filled with despair. He had finally obtained his current status and power, but he was going to die soon. The feeling was enough to make him break down. If it had been any other day, he would have stood up long ago when the Jintian faction was abusing their power on Emerald Island. However, he was not in the mood to do anything with his body's condition. However, the person in front of him had not even checked his pulse, yet he had said such a thing. How'd he know? Looking at the change in Yi Li Fei's expression, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved slightly. It seems that gang leader Yi already has an idea in his heart. This is a good deal for us, so why not do it? Yi Li Fei fell into silence. He did not immediately agree to Bailey Hongzhuang's deal. After a moment, Yi Li Fei slowly said, I really don't like the Jintian faction, but can you really cure me? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. There's no need to lie about something that will be exposed very soon. If faction leader Yi doesn't believe me, I can help you relieve some of your pain. However, your condition can't be cured immediately. It will take some time. If we let faction leader Gao and the others wait outside for too long, I'm afraid it's not very appropriate. Yi Li Fei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in shock and doubt. If it had been any other day, he would not have believed her. However, he no longer had any hope. At least the person in front of him could give him a glimmer of hope. He could not give up such a great temptation. All right, I promise you. Deal. After Bailey Hongzhuang took Yi Li Fei's pulse, she suddenly frowned. She had only looked at Yi Li Fei's situation before and had a certain judgment in her heart. But after taking his pulse, she found that the situation seemed to be a bit more complicated than she thought. Noticing the change in Bailey Hongzhuang's brows, Yi Li Fei's heart couldn't help but tighten. Is my illness incurable? Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Yi Li Fei and shook her head. It's time for gang leader Yi to pay more attention to the people around you. It's very dangerous to be poisoned without knowing it. Hearing this, Yi Li Fei could not help but be stunned. He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment, his face filled with disbelief. You're saying someone poisoned me? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That's right. This is impossible. Yi Li Fei hurriedly denied. It's impossible for the people around me to poison me. The people from the 100 Flowers Gate never said that I was poisoned. If their medical skills were better than mine, why couldn't they cure you? Bailey Hongzhuang asked in return. Then how can you prove that I was poisoned? Yi Li Fei still didn't believe her. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was indifferent. She did not feel the slightest bit unhappy because of Yi Li Fei's doubts. She took out a silver needle from her needle bag. Chapter 2986. As Bailey Hongzhuang and Yi Li Fei followed Yi Li Fei into the room, Lu Jiangang couldn't help but frown. Boss, are those two really disciples of the 100 Flowers sect? Gao Hanchun frowned slightly. He had always been very sure of his judgment, but after seeing Yi Li Fei's attitude, he began to doubt himself. Whether they are or not, we'll know once they come out. But Yi Li Fei has already confirmed their identities. Lu Jiangang said doubtfully. Gue Jun smiled faintly. Second brother, you're thinking too simply. Yi Li Fei is already very jealous of their heaven-shaking faction's development in the past 2 years. Plus, we've created a reputation on Emerald Island recently, so he's already very dissatisfied with us. Now that he saw us bring 2 guys in, he naturally won't reveal the truth to us, so we can't determine whether they are really us or not. Gao Hanchun nodded. Gue Jun's opinion is the same as mine. Let's wait for now. If those guys are really fakes, Yi Li Fei doesn't have to help them hide. Lu Jiangang only understood after hearing this. His brain wasn't as good as Gao Hanchun's and Gue Jun's. The Great Cyan Gang is very dissatisfied with us now. If we start a conflict with them on Emerald Island, it will be very disadvantageous for us. What should we do? Lu Jiangang lowered his voice. Originally, this kind of matter didn't need to alarm Gao Hanchun personally, but because the Great Cyan Gang had already expressed their dissatisfaction, they had no choice but to come personally. Once the Great Cyan Gang used this rumor to attack them, then the situation would become much more complicated. Yi Li Fei's hidden illness has been acting up recently. He can't even take care of himself. Who knows? He won't be able to live for long. We don't need to worry too much. Coming here today is just a formality. Once Yi Li Fei dies, we'll take the opportunity to swallow up the Great Cyan Gang. This way, our heaven-shaking faction will become even more powerful. A meaningful smile appeared on Gao Hanchun's lips. He had been thinking about this plan for a long time. An old guy like Yi Li Fei was no longer suitable to continue living in this kind of environment. Dying early and reincarnating early was the best. Lu Jiangang and Gue Jun looked at each other, and a happy smile appeared in their eyes. Yi Fei still didn't believe Bailey Hongzhuang's words, but after seeing how confident Bailey Hongzhuang was, he chose to shut his mouth. He didn't believe that his trusted aide would poison him. However, he had experienced a lot of things to get to where he was now, so he couldn't guarantee it. However, when he saw that the silver needle in Bailey Hongzhuang's hand was gradually turning black, his face turned extremely ugly. How is this possible? Yi Fei was in disbelief, but he forced himself to calm down. The people from the 100 Flowers Gate didn't find out that I was poisoned. At this moment, Yi Fei no longer doubted Bailey Hongzhuang. He just lowered his voice and expressed his doubts. Chapter 2987. Yi Fei stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in a daze. The latter's words were like a hammer smashing into his brain, causing him to be in a daze. He had always thought that his old illness had relapsed and was extremely serious. He had never thought that someone had poisoned him. According to what you're saying, the other party must have understood my condition very well, which is why they poisoned me like this. At this moment, Yi Fei's gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang had completely changed. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang was his only hope for survival. The problem that the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate had not discovered had been discovered by Bailey Hongzhuang. Just this point alone was enough to prove that Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills were better than the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Yi Fei with admiration. You're not too stupid. The other party could have chosen this method of poisoning based on your condition. This way, no one would know that you died without knowing why. Yi Fei only felt a chill rising from his feet to his spine. In that case, he really should thank Gao Hanshun. If Gao Hanshun had not brought these two people here, he would not have known that someone was trying to harm him until he died. Master, how should I address you? Yi Fei clasped his hands in greeting. He had become extremely respectful towards Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang pointed at Bewitching next to her and said, "This is my big brother, Chen." I see. I'm sorry for the disrespect. Please forgive my previous rudeness. Yi Fei's attitude changed very quickly, but it was also very natural. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. Sect leader Yi, you don't have to be so polite. I've said before that this deal between us is a win-win situation. Since second young Master D has already seen through that I was poisoned, I wonder if there is still hope for my condition to be cured? Yi Fei's probing question made even that dignified face of his could not help but reveal a nervous expression. No one wanted to die, especially someone in his position. He did not want to die even more. I've already answered your question when I first entered the room. Yi Fei was stunned for a moment before a smile appeared on his face. Thank you, young Masters D. From now on, you're my Qinghong Gang's VIP guests. No matter what it is, as long as it is something my Qinghong Gang can do, I will not refuse. I'm very happy to have a friend like Gang Leader Yi. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching smiled. It seemed that Gao Hanshun had done them a huge favor today. Originally, they were still thinking about how to avoid the heaven-shaking faction's pursuit. Now, Gao Hanshun not only arranged a reasonable identity for them, but also helped them find an ally. This was really a great thing. Bailey Hongzhuang gave Yi Fei a few simple needles, and Yi Fei felt the pain in his body ease a lot. His eyes suddenly became brighter. He no longer doubted that he had met two experts today. This also proved that his life was not meant to end. Sect Leader Yi, we still have one more thing to ask for your help. Bewitching said, Young Master D, please speak. We still have two friends. I wonder if we can bring them to stay with the Qinghong Gang? Chapter 2988. Yi Fei, who originally had some doubts about the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching, suddenly understood everything after hearing Bewitching's request. The others did not know whether the murder of the Gao Hanshun brothers was true or not, but he knew very well that it was true. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching had appeared out of nowhere and directly expressed their dissatisfaction with the heaven-shaking faction, he was a little puzzled. However, when a number of people increased to 4, the truth was obvious. However, whether or not Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun were the murderers of the Gao Hanshan brothers, he did not care at all. In other words, to him, the enemy of his enemy was his friend. From his point of view, the alliance between them was more reliable. It was not that he did not know about the recent movements of the heaven-shaking faction, and he was also very clear about what the ambitious Gao Hanshan was planning. It was precisely because of this that his hatred for Gao Hanshan had reached a peak. Unfortunately, it would not be easy for him to protect the entire Great Cyan Gang, as he did not have long to live. However, as long as he could keep his life, the heaven-shaking faction would have to check their teeth if they wanted to swallow the Great Cyan Gang. Young Master D's friends are also my Great Cyan Gang's distinguished guests. Naturally, we welcome them. Why don't I send someone to invite the two of them over now? Yi Li Fei's smile was polite and modest, with a hint of intimacy. Di Beichun nodded and wrote a note on the side and handed it to Yi Li Fei. Then I'll have to trouble gang leader Yi. Give this note to them, and they will come over. How is this troublesome? But my body, I'll have to trouble the two young masters D. Don't worry, gang leader Yi. My second brother's medical skills have always been praised. As long as he says there's no problem, there will naturally be no problem. Di Beichun's face rippled with a faint smile. Since Yi Li Fei had already expressed his sincerity to them, they would naturally let Yi Li Fei have no worries. The smile on Yi Li Fei's face grew even wider. This was the happiest day he had in a long time. He immediately ordered his subordinates to go to the inn and invite them over. After the discussion, Bailey Hongzhuang and Yi Li Fei followed Yi Li Fei out of the room. Sect Leader Gao, thank you so much. The 100 Flowers Gate's medical skills are truly worthy of their reputation. My old ailment is already much better. Yi Li Fei smiled and walked in front of Gao Hanshan, but a fierce and bloodthirsty light quietly flashed in the depths of his eyes. Where was the slightest bit of affection? Hearing Yi Li Fei's words, Gao Hanshan sized up Bailey Hongzhuang and Yi Li Fei without batting an eyelid. The doubt in his heart grew stronger. According to the information he received, the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate should have been here a few days ago. Could it be that the information he received was wrong? Or did Yi Li Fei, the old fox, have a trick up his sleeve and invite the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate to treat him twice? Or perhaps these two fellows had made some sort of deal with Yi Li Fei? Gao Hanshuan's mind spun as he constantly pondered where this question came from. However, he couldn't give a definite answer for the time being. Chapter 2989. I'm really happy that gang leader Ye's old illness can be alleviated. I've been very worried about gang leader Ye's health all this time. Gao Hanshan said with a smile. Yi Li Fei cupped his hands. I've troubled gang leader Gao to worry about me. My old illness has been with me for many years. Although it hurts when it flares up, it doesn't have much of an effect. It's fine. Hearing Yi Li Fei's words, Gao Hanshan couldn't help but sneer in his heart. He knew very well that Yi Li Fei wouldn't live for long. What was the use of pretending to be strong in front of him now? The Great Cyan Gang would fall into his hands sooner or later. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun looked at Yi Li Fei and Gao Hanshuan's false civility and sighed in their hearts. In fact, everyone present was discerning. These two foxes couldn't wait to kill each other in their hearts, but on the surface, they still had to pretend to be good brothers. It really wasn't easy. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun didn't stay for long before Yi Li Fei arranged for them to rest. Clearly, there were still many things to discuss between the Great Cyan Gang and the Heaven-Shaking Gang. After all, Gao Hanshan had personally come this time to explain to Yi Li Fei. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun stayed in the house. Not long after, when Xiren and Shangwan Yingying were led into the house by the Great Cyan Gang's cultivators. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun were safe and sound, Xiren and Shangwan Yingying both heaved a sigh of relief. It's great that you're fine. Previously, when they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangwan Yingying were forced to follow Gao Hanshan and the others to the Great Cyan Gang, they were almost worried to death. The two of them even planned to kidnap them and fight, but they didn't receive any news, so they didn't act rashly for the time being. Then, they actually received an invitation from the Great Cyan Gang, which left them completely dumbfounded. However, after seeing Bewitching's handwritten note, the two of them agreed to come together. How did you two do it? Is the Qinghong gang safe? Xiren walked in front of Bewitching, his handsome and refined face filled with curiosity. Bewitching nodded. Right now, we can be considered as allies of the Great Green Gang, so we don't have to worry about the Heaven-Shaking Gang's search. As soon as he said this, when Xiren and Shangguan Yingying both widened their eyes, their faces filled with disbelief. Aren't the two of you too amazing? How did you find such a powerful ally in such a short time? You'll have to ask Hong Zhuang about that. Bewitching chuckled. Xiren and Wen Xinya's gazes immediately fell upon Bailey Hongzhuang. Their faces filled with curiosity as they waited for Bailey Hongzhuang's reply. Gang leader Yi is injured. I promised to treat him, but he helped us hide it. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Just like that, we formed an alliance. Bailey Hongzhuang concisely recounted what had happened before. Hearing that, Xiren couldn't help but give Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up. Amazing. Hongzhuang, I'm really admiring you more and more now. Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but sigh. You guys can really turn danger into safety every time. I thought it was really over. You almost scared me to death. Chapter 2990. If Yi Li Fei and Gao Hanshun were very good friends, then in the previous situation, even if she and Di Bei Chun did their best, she was afraid that it would be a dead end. Fortunately, God was on their side. Then according to you, we should stay in the Great Cyan Gang for the time being? Di Bei Chun nodded. At present, the entire Emerald Island is being searched by the Heaven-Shaking Gang. If we stay here, the Heaven-Shaking Gang won't have the guts to search. The longer we delay, the more disadvantageous it will be for the Heaven-Shaking Gang. As long as they can't find us, everyone's doubts will become louder and louder. Next, we should wait to watch a good show. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly, and a confident and dazzling light lingered on her face. There was always a light at the end of the tunnel. This was probably the situation they were in now. In that case, Gao Hanshun has really found a big problem for himself. Xiren couldn't help but chuckle. Previously, they were chased out by the Heaven-Shaking Gang like stray dogs. That feeling was really uncomfortable. Now that they finally had a safe place to stay, they were really relieved. I'm afraid the conflict between the Great Cyan Gang and the Heaven-Shaking Gang isn't small. Gang leader Yi was even poisoned. Maybe this has something to do with the Heaven-Shaking Gang. Bailey Hongzhuang said in a deep voice. Although Yi Li Fei's performance was very vague, she still noticed the subtle changes in the former's expression. When she said that Yi Li Fei was poisoned, Yi Li Fei obviously thought of something in his mind, but he didn't say it out loud. In addition, Yi Li Fei and Gao Hanshun's previous conversation had a hidden edge. Yi Li Fei obviously deliberately showed that he was still very powerful in front of Gao Hanshun. From this, she could analyze a lot of things. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with admiration. It seems that we have the same idea. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Yi Li Fei's tacit understanding. Although they didn't know why they came to this conclusion, they understood that the conflict between the two gangs was huge. Now I can finally have a good rest. Xiren sat down at the side. Although he hadn't been busy with other things for the past few days, his spirit had always been tense. This kind of mental exhaustion was even more uncomfortable than physical exhaustion. Let's take a break first. Gang leader Yi and Gao Hanshun are discussing something. When Gao Hanshun and the others leave, gang leader Yi should come to us, Di Beichen said. In that case, gang leader Yi should also know that we are the ones who killed Gao Hanxia and the others. Xiren said faintly. Although it was a question, his tone was firm. What does it matter if he knows or not? Di Beichen raised his eyebrows slightly. Even if he has some guesses in his heart, he won't say it. It wasn't until Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had dinner in the house that Yi Li Fei appeared in front of them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others noticed that there was still some anger left on Yi Lifei's face. It seemed that his conversation with Gao Hanshun and the others before was not pleasant. However, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, Yi Lifei's face quickly filled with a smile. I talked with Gao Hanshun and the others for a long time, and I only came now. Sorry for the lack of hospitality. Chapter 2991. As soon as Yi Lifei entered the room, he noticed Xiren and Shangguan Yingying. He couldn't help but ask, "Young Masters D, I wonder if you can introduce these two new friends to me? These two are our friends, Wen Ran and his wife, Shangguan Ying." Di Beichun introduced. "So it's young Master Wen and Miss Shangguan. I'm late and have not received you well. Please forgive me." Yi Lifei could be said to be extremely polite. However, his life was in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang, so he naturally had to be extremely polite. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying saw that Yi Lifei, as the leader of the Qinghong gang, was so polite. They sighed in their hearts. Hongzhuang's ability was really amazing. It was really not easy to make the leader of the gang act like this. "Greetings, Leader Yi. Leader Yi is too polite. We can't afford it," Xiren said with a smile. "You are all my Qinghong gang's distinguished guests. If you need anything, just say it. I will definitely do it," Yi Lifei said with a smile. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying looked at each other. This Yi Lifei was much more pleasing to the eye than Gao Hanshun. "Leader Yi, it seems that you didn't have a good conversation with Gao Hanshun and the others?" Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. She was not interested in the grudges between the Qinghong gang and the Jintian gang. However, she was very interested in destroying the Jintian gang. Yi Lifei was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Gao Hanshun and the others are getting more and more insatiable. Although the Emerald Island is under the jurisdiction of the Penglai Palace, people from the Penglai Palace rarely come here. As the largest local force on the Emerald Island, my Qinghong gang naturally has a lot of influence on the Emerald Island. Recently, the Jintian gang has caused a huge commotion on the Emerald Island in order to find the murderer. Many people have already questioned them, so I directly told them that they can't continue like this. Gao Hanshun came to my Qinghong gang today to explain this matter. However, he actually asked me to help him find the murderer. As long as the murderer is not found, they will definitely not leave. At this point, the anger on Yi Lifei's face became even more intense. Yi Lifei, had commanded for so many years. Since when did it become Gao Hanshun's turn to order him around? With the Green Great Gang's strength, we should be able to reject their request, right? Di Beichun asked. Yi Lifei nodded. Of course, I rejected them. However, Gao Hanshun seemed to know about the problem with my body. That's why he was so arrogant. In that case, gang leader, you should have some guesses about who poisoned you. Bailey Hongzhuang's deep black eyes flashed with a bright light. She stared at Yi Lifei as if she could see through everything. Yi Lifei narrowed his eyes. Now that his life was in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang, they were already in the same boat. Naturally, he didn't mind telling them about the situation. If I'm not wrong, it should be my trusted aide. At this point, a look of hatred appeared on Yi Lifei's face. Anyone who tasted this kind of betrayal would feel very unhappy. Previously, someone told me that they saw him and Gao Hanshun walking out of a place together. However, I believed it too much and didn't have any other thoughts. Chapter 2992. Hearing Yi Lifei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun could not help but look at each other. It seemed that the truth was just as they had thought. Yi Lifei had really been tricked by Gao Hanshun. "May I know what sect leader you plans to do now?" Di Beichun inquired. Yi Lifei's gaze gradually deepened. "My trusted aide will still send me the medicine tonight. I hope that second young Master D can help me appraise it. If it really is him, I won't let him off so easily." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. "Naturally, that won't be a problem. I'll need some time to cure sect leader Ye's old illness. During this process, I can't let you continue to be poisoned. Otherwise, wouldn't all my efforts have been in vain?" Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Yi Li Fei suddenly stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in shock. He asked in disbelief, "Second young Master D, do you mean that my old illness can be completely cured?" He had thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to cure him of the poison and prolong his originally short life. Just this point alone was enough to make him extremely happy. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had now told him that not only could she cure him of the poison, but she could also cure his old illness completely. One had to know that his old illness had been with him for many years. Over the years, he had invited many doctors to treat him, but none of them had any effect. He had gradually given up and only hoped that the pain could be alleviated a little. That was already the happiest thing for him. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had now said that she could cure his old illness. How could he not be excited? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded very naturally. Of course. I had intended to cure your old illness anyway. However, when I examined you, I found that you had been poisoned. Looking at the confident and calm Bailey Hongzhuang before him, Yi Li Fei was so surprised that he did not know what to say. All these years, he had been unable to make a breakthrough in his cultivation, which was also related to his old illness. He had almost believed that he would be stuck at this level for the rest of his life, but now, Bailey Hongzhuang's words had rekindled his hope. It was simply too delightful. Second young Master D, if you can cure my old illness, then you will be my benefactor. Yi Li Fei's eyes became unusually bright, and his weathered face seemed to radiate with glory in an instant. His entire person seemed to be in high spirits. "Secmaster, your medicine is here." At this moment, a voice rang out from outside the room. The faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but change slightly. Fortunately, when they spoke, they used Yuan Qi to seal the entire room and didn't leak out the slightest bit of their voices. Otherwise, the person outside the door might have heard their conversation. "Come in." A man walked in with a bowl of soup in his hands and placed the medicine on the table. He then sized up Bailey Hongzhuang and the others before saying to Yi Li Fei, "Sect Master, you must remember to drink your medicine." Yi Li Fei nodded. The expression on his face was the same as ever, but a dim light flashed in the depths of his eyes. "I know. You may leave first." The man acknowledged and left, appearing to be very honest. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had not been so certain that Yi Li Fei had been poisoned, it would have been very difficult for them to suspect this man. After the man left, Yi Li Fei quickly looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and placed the silver needles into the medicine. "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.